episode of Nothing But Dicta, the podcast where everyone has an opinion and you get to hear it. I'm your host, Erin, and today we're talking about everybody's favorite topic, interviewing.
Hello, my name is Tim Henderson. I am the Chief Recruitment Professional Development Officer at Finnegan. Finnegan is a Washington, D.C. based intellectual property law firm, and I oversee all of the recruiting, training, onboarding, and performance management functions for student associates, technical specialists, patent agents, and all attorneys at the firm.
So you've been in professional development for a very long time. After checking through your LinkedIn and looking at your resume and doing my research on you, is there any advice that you can give to students that would make the recruiter's job easier?
That's a great question. Yes, I think GW actually does a really nice job at this, but I think there's a tendency for law students to focus so exclusively on their academic and theoretical studies during law school and kind of ignore some of the business aspects of working in the legal industry. And by that, I mean everything from how to effectively communicate and network with people, how to understand simple budget and spreadsheets, how to learn client development and client relationship building skills. So anything that you can do during law school to practice those skills, I definitely recommend that you try to do it, because there's an expectation when you enter the legal industry that you have to develop those skills. So any kind of ramp up or running start you can get to compared to your peers, you're going to be at a definite advantage.
So going kind of off of that, when somebody comes in for an interview, what would you describe the well-prepared applicant to look and to sound like?
That's a good question. I think first and foremost, you need to have a narrative prepared for that open-ended question of tell me about yourself. And you need to make it stand out and make yourself interesting. I think, recruiters, myself included, meet a lot of people throughout the year, and you can kind of spot someone who's giving a trite or kind of a stock answer. So make it interesting and tell a little bit about your background that will make you unique. For instance, when I used to interview, I would touch on the fact that I grew up on a farm in rural Kansas. And the reason people liked hearing that was because they thought it would demonstrate that I had a good work ethic and that I would do any kind of job that needs to get done to do the job well, which is true, but things like that. So not just, I'm getting my JD from George Washington University Law School, but here's what led me to that point where I went to law school and a couple of tidbits that make you unique. In addition to that, this is kind of interviewing 101, but be able to answer, I think, substantively and truthfully why that particular employer is of interest to you. Again, you can kind of smell it a mile away, someone who comes in and has this stock answer of, I like Finnegan because you do intellectual property or something along those lines. It's never quite that generic, but I've had students actually name the wrong employer during an interview, and I chalk it up to nerves sometimes. Sometimes I just chalk it up to lack of research and lack of interest.
So do you have any advice to students how they could kind of take the law school experience and make the most out of it? I know we get bombarded with take all of these classes, do all of these activities, but it's helpful for us to hear from people in the recruitment sector what actually ends up mattering.
I'm a big believer in experiential learning. And so I think any type of hands-on experiences you can get, be it through a clinic at the law school or an internship with a judge or with another type of employer, those are the types of experiences that stand out to me. This is my subjective opinion, so I'll cast it as that. But to me, those types of hands-on learning experiences mean much more as a recruiting person to me than a law review experience. Professors may jump down my throat saying that, but journal experiences are good because I think anytime you can hone your writing abilities, it's great. But I will also tell you in the real practice of law, that law review or journal type of writing is oftentimes, it's very different than what you'll be doing as an actual practicing attorney, where you're writing more as an advocate and persuasively to advocate particular positions rather than in an academic sense that you might do in a journal, a law journal. In addition to that, grades at Finnegan at least are a factor, but I love the fact that they're not the prevailing factor. We really do look at the totality of the circumstances, kind of to the point of experiential learning. Moot court, mock trial experience is a big benefit to people who are applying to our firm, at least, because I think it allows us to see that folks can think on their feet. They can think standing up and advocate particular positions doing so. Other things that make people stand out, personality is a big deal. Emotional intelligence. So, we are a patent-heavy firm. We do all intellectual property. With that, we hired some PhDs, masters in engineering and science very frequently. But we pay very close attention to whether people kind of have that fit factor, which can be demonstrated through emotional intelligence. And that means having a two-way dialogue with the people you're talking to, being friendly, perceptive, and so on during the interview.
Do you mind when an associate comes in and is interviewing for this job and starts asking you questions? Do you feel like you're getting interrogated, or is that almost welcomed that they're interested and want to kind of get answers?
I love it because it shows an interest level, and if they're detailed questions specific to the firm, all the better. And that lights a recruiter's fire because it shows that level of attention to detail and interest that you don't see. I think the death knell for an interview for me is when you say at the end, and I always do, do you have any questions? And there's crickets, there's radio silence. I will oftentimes not recommend an offer, even if they're a decent candidate, because of that. So it's a big deal.
I've always assumed that was a big deal. And I've always had my personal questions, and they normally deal with the firm. And if somebody, I've always wondered, are you happy where you're working? That's a big one for me.
Oh, it's huge. Yes. And oftentimes people I don't know if they're hesitant or afraid to ask those types of questions, but they're very appropriate.
What do you think are the most common misconceptions that students have when they come in and expect to perform in private practice?
I think law schools lay the groundwork for you to understand how to practice law. But I think the biggest misconception people might have when they're graduating from law school is that they know a lot and that they know what they're doing, which is typically not the case. I think if a law graduate can come into the workplace with the attitude of learning, continuous learning, and enthusiasm to soak up what the employer is telling you, and the attitude that, I don't know a lot at this point in my career, so I'm going to take as much guidance and mentoring and supervision as I can soak up. And I'm going to do it energetically and happily and show the employer that level of energy and enthusiasm that I might have shown to get where I am now. Good grades, good academic standing, and so on. I think another thing is employers absolutely love people who can come in and roll their sleeves up and get even small jobs done and done well. It's kind of building yourself up in your career. Sometimes you have to do unglamorous work, be it a doc review or helping out with some really what is perceived to be small, minute research projects. But if you can do it really well with a smile on your face, you're going to start getting a repeat business from partners and senior associates and senior attorneys in any setting. And you're going to be setting yourself up really well internally as having a great reputation.
What would you say is a way that right now with all this COVID and the fact that people aren't leaving their homes is a way that people can kind of work towards networking in this new social climate?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think the same rules still apply, Erin, in terms of taking that proactive approach of, reaching out to people, hopefully getting a warm lead from, people you're most comfortable with now, and saying, writing to the person you're trying to network with and say, Jane Doe recommended I reach out to you. Readership goes up. They've demonstrated 75 to 80% if they get that mental trigger that you're being referred by somebody they know, their comfort level increases. Reaching out, I would recommend reaching out by email initially, giving that person as much information about who you are. I always think about attaching a resume or a link to your LinkedIn bio, just so they can click on it and say, oh yeah, she sounds kind of interesting. I'll take the time. Then Jane recommended her. But then don't leave it up to the person you're contacting to write back to you and make that actual meeting connection. But taking the next step and saying, I know we're working remotely at the present, but I'd love to have a quick Microsoft Teams call or a Zoom call if you have time, and just making sure to connect. It's much like you would do in day-to-day networking non-COVID times, where you might go down to someone's office and do a quick informational interview with them or take them a coffee or what have you. It's just different because you're doing it virtually.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people when they network, tend to, send that initial message. They're kind of unclear in their message about what their ultimate desire is. I would never try to cast it necessarily. It's a bit of a social game, I suppose, of give me a job, but instead I want to learn from you. People love to talk about themselves like I'm doing now. People love to talk about themselves. And if you cast it as, hey, you're an information font and I'm going to soak it up, most people love it.
I've just found that a lot of students right now in this current situation is we're almost scared to do that because the school sets up these networking events for us. And I think we were so used to being almost spoon-fed opportunity.
Yep.
That now we have to seek it out a little bit more diligently, and I think that's alarming people a lot because they're like, oh God, I have to cold call through this email, and it's like, just send the email. It's the worst they can do is not respond.
I think one benefit of COVID, I was excited to get on a call with you because you're not my teammates that I see every single day on Zoom or talk to on the phone. It's something different, and I think most people feel that way, that they're missing that newness of relationships that they're developing, and unless you're like a severe introvert, maybe not, but most people are yearning for it, so it could work to your advantage too, I think.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tim. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. If you liked this episode of Nothing But Dicta, make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube page, tell your friends, and tune in again for another episode.